2 Timothy chapter number 2, if you would. 2 Timothy chapter 2. While you're turning there, I want to say that we really appreciate everyone's ministry in the church. Today I'm thinking of the Three for Him trio, which includes Jane as the pianist, because they've been going since early this morning. They haven't been home since they left home this morning. Came to Sunday school, church, and then the assisted living facility. Did you manage to squeak in some lunch, Jeff? Barely. All right. And then here tonight, so we are really blessed by that. And it's just a blessing to gather together with God's people, isn't it? Just a reminder that on Tuesday night there'll be a meeting of the men's discipleship group. One of the things they've been doing the last couple of years is preparing a budget for the church, obviously this time for 2014. We prepare a budget, we go over it again, we put it out to the church. It actually is a vote of the church, but the men's discipleship group does the work of going through each item, talking about them, making recommendations for the next year. So all men and boys are welcome to come, and there's a worksheet down here on the front row. It's the same exact, Tuesday night, I'm just going to walk down here and pick up what's left, copy some more if we need them. So if you're going to be here Tuesday night, it would be to your advantage to pick up one of those tonight, if you would. Let's read a couple verses from 2 Timothy chapter 2. Jeff, would you plan on a closing hymn, please? All right, 2 Timothy, and maybe, Jeff, you already had, but just in case, 2 Timothy chapter 2, just verses 1 and 2. It says, "Thou therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also." And just to note that verse 3 says, "Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ." So that takes me back to this morning, because sometimes the Christian life is tough. Sometimes it's really, really tough. That's not an indictment against God. It's not an indictment against the Bible. It's not an indictment against Christianity. It's a testimony to the fact that we live in a sin-cursed world. And because of that, we're battling the world and the flesh and the devil. And so we're told in the Word of God, endure hardness. And if He tells us to do that, we can. Isn't that great? Well, that verse 3 has nothing to do with tonight. It just struck me that is the next verse. For the last couple Sunday nights, we've been having actually more or less a one-sided conversation. Like, not exactly, but more or less. It's been a one-sided, more or less mission conversation. Now, folks have asked good questions. Some folks spoke to me outside of this time, the evening service, and asked me some more questions. And this really isn't a sermon. If you came to hear an expositional sermon, you've heard all the scripture you're going to hear tonight. And the reason I'm having this conversation is because for a number of reasons I've been thinking through some mission issues. Missions is a big, big part of our church. For example, in the church budget, there's an item that says flowers and gifts. I don't think it'll take the men's discipleship group 30 seconds to discuss that. They'll say, well, what did we spend? What did we plan on? Do we need to add or cut back a little? Let's move on. Because flowers and gifts are not a very big part of the church's ministry. Flowers are, to be quite frank with you, someone dies. We don't normally send flowers to the hospital because it can get quite expensive. So we just don't do that. And gifts are really, we don't give too many gifts. Last year we gave Jerry and Pat a gift when we celebrated the church anniversary. We gave Dee and Linda a gift. They're moving away. We don't usually, it'll take us just moments. But there's other things that are a big part of our church that are worthy of more discussion, and missions is one of those things. And for the last year, it actually goes back more than that, but it's been about a year that it was laid out to the men's discipleship group. Some of these thoughts I've been having, some questions I've been asking myself and asking the Lord, where do you want us to go with this? And I want you to know what page I'm on. I want you to know what I'm thinking, because this is not a dictatorship. This is a church. And we need to be on the same page as we move forward. Because for a church our size, I don't have any copies of the mission budget, but most of you have one or have seen it, and I can print some. The missions is a big part of our church in money and in attention and in prayer and all those things. And so these are sort of where I'm sort of telling you where I've come to, where I've not, where I've changed my mind about a few things. And that is that I think when it comes down to it, and if you're visiting with us, a lot of this surrounds the fact that our church, since the very beginning, has been very involved in the training of national pastors. And the way that works is very simple. Twice a year, I get on a plane and travel to somewhere on the mission field. 11 times to India, 4 times to Tanzania, once to Romania, always to do with teaching. And I use the word training because what needs to happen with national pastors is more than just information. It's more than just telling them information. And takes me a while to get ready to go, takes me a while to recover. That's why we have an assistant pastor. I'm not suggesting if the Lord directed us otherwise, we would ask the boots to leave, but that's where it came from, having an assistant pastor. So that when I'm on the mission field or during my vacation, someone is available who steps in and takes over to provide some continuity and like that. So what we're trying to do on the mission field, simply stated, is we want to be helping national pastors to start and pastor autonomous churches. And autonomous churches are self-supporting churches. And the pattern is in the New Testament. It's the pattern of the Apostle Paul. It's the pattern of what we call the pattern missionary, the Apostle Paul, whose 3 missionary trips are recorded in the book of Acts. Now, these are the 3 things I think are required for a church to be autonomous. You may have some other thoughts, and I'm always open to other people's thoughts. Number 1, there needs to be a trained pastor. That is like basic issue here in the United States, a trained pastor. We don't all have the same training. I have a master's degree in church administration. Pastor Boots has a Master of Divinity degree. That's advanced training from what I have as training, and teaching is more involved than ours. But when we say here in America, well, we need a pastor who has some training, that's sort of a given. Pretty unusual, not unheard of, but pretty unusual, someone to be a pastor of the church who doesn't have some amount of theological and practical training. For years and years, it never crossed my mind, where would they get this training? And our ministry, and when I say our, I'm talking about you and I, has been mostly in places where, rural places and poor places, where training and teaching doesn't just take place like it does here. You graduate from high school, you get a grant from the government, or you borrow some money, and away you go to college. It doesn't happen quite that way. And so, but to be autonomous, a church needs a trained pastor. It's just amazing to me. You probably thought this a long time ago. I didn't. This struck me a few weeks ago. You have to take the truth somewhere if the truth is going to be there. But the error is already there. Did you ever think about that? The error is already there. And so when you have a pastor on the mission field with what we'll call inadequate training, and I'm not being unkind, you would be amazed the national pastors who have very, very little theological training. They're zealous, they're sincere, but they're self-taught, you know. It's like the person who said that a person who has themselves for their doctor has a fool for a patient, if you can follow that. If you're your own, that person said, if you're your own patient, if you're your own doctor, you might not have the wisest patient. Well, a pastor who's sincere but doesn't have training and doesn't have the resources that we have. Most of the national pastors that I've worked with have never used the internet. They know what that means. They don't know what it means. In most languages, there aren't a lot of theological books written. There would be in Spanish. There would be in French. There would be in German. There wouldn't be in Kannada, the state language of Karnataka, India. Very few theological books translated. In fact, many theological words don't exist in other languages. Many languages, there's no word for Trinity. There's no word for Bible. There's no word for rapture, and so many things. So this business of training national pastors is a serious and necessary business. Not only that, But to be autonomous, a church needs a congregation that can financially support him. And this really goes back to last week. I've become absolutely convinced, probably simple to you, but if a church can't support the pastor, it's not autonomous. If money's coming from somewhere else, wherever the money's coming from, they have a say. Because we have a financial responsibility. We have an accountability to God for the money we're sending, so we have a say. So there needs to be a congregation that can support him financially. That's why the man I mentioned last week, Dr. Sambhu Nath Day, Dr. Day is maybe 60, maybe over 60, 65, I'm not sure. He only supports church planters that have a skill that they can use to support their family until the church can support them. And incidentally, there's a lot of motivation to that, isn't there? If I was a plumber and I did plumbing until the Chapel Baptist Church could support me, and for those of you who don't know this, the Chapel Baptist Church actually supported us from the first day. What they didn't do from the first day was pay our health insurance. But that's not the subject we do today, but that's where we started. Well, if you're a national pastor and you're thinking about your motivation for ministry, and part of the motivation is, look, we need to see God, trust God to build this congregation up to the place where they can support me because a check's coming from America. A lot of places it's not going to happen. The church is never going to be self-supporting. Number 3, a church needs a place to meet. You've heard about these places where the churches meet under a tree. Well, I've been to a church that met under a tree. Doesn't last long term. That's not a long-term strategy. They need a place to meet. It may be very simple. It may be you've seen these African mud, what we call a mud hut, trees standing up with mud plastered over them, no windows, no door, and I've preached in places like that. It may be as simple as that, but it's a place to meet. So last Sunday night I posed this question. Someone came to me right after the service to talk about it. I've been debating this. To support or not support national pastors. That's one of the things I've really been wrestling with. Dr. Day, a very wise man, he cautioned me in general discussion, sort of what we would say is, look, one size doesn't fit all. He cautioned me, be very careful about hard and fast rules made in America that you try to apply in wherever, India, Tanzania, these other places. With that said, the question to support or not support national pastors, which for those of you who don't know this, we've done so for years. Today we support 5 Indian national pastors. Going forward, my answer is I'm not inclined to do so. I'm not inclined to do so. Again, when it comes to hard and fast rules, Dr. Day said, be careful. I'm not inclined to support national pastors going forward. I am inclined to support, if you were here last week, I'm inclined to support the other end of the conduit and the other part of the world. Like, for example, Athem Chothi has, I think, 40 church planters work under him. Now, in his case, he's also a pastor. He's also the president of the Himalayan Baptist Seminary. He's also the head of an orphanage and a Christian day school and a number of other things. Some seem to understand when I had Essio and Lesio up here, and some didn't, which is okay, because sometimes I confuse myself. My point is, the people here who give the money trust someone. In our case, that's me. To give that money to someone or someone's. I'm inclined to support this person, the conduit. I'm not inclined to support those church planters out there. If he chose to give some of his support to them, that's his business. But he would understand this money is to support you to be helping these church planters. But we need to find that person if we're going to do that. We need to find him. In other words, I'm the kind of person who sometimes I look before I leap. Probably no one else here does that, but sometimes I do. And it's because I've met some wonderful men on the mission field. Wonderful. I've met wonderful women too, but I'm talking about pastors preaching the word who are putting their lives on the line every time they open up the Word of God, never knowing what's coming through the door of that hut or who. I'm inclined toward that guy, Athem Chothi. I'm inclined toward him. Which is why I think that my next trip will be back to India, back to him, so that if we support him as a conduit, and all this requires a vote of the church, I can't decide this. If that happens, we'll know him pretty well. Because sort of acting in good faith, but without enough information, we've gotten ourselves in a couple problems supporting national pastors. Some of them you know about, some of them you don't. Not because they've been hid from you, but because some of them didn't become public knowledge. But we ended up supporting a national pastor because I was encouraged to do so, who I came to know didn't believe in the Trinity. I almost fell out of my seat. I said, "Pardon me?" They said, "Well, he left us because he doesn't believe in the Trinity." My blood pressure went up because there is no excuse for that. If you don't believe in the Trinity, you're not saved. If you preach the Word of God and you don't believe in the Trinity, you preach a false gospel. I'm not trying to be too hard on that national pastor, and I have to be careful what I say, but the conduit let us down. Follow what I'm saying? No reason in the world we should have found out about that after the fact. It didn't only have repercussions for that poor fellow's life, his family, his extended family. It was a nightmare. Because when you start giving money away on the mission field to a national pastor, they don't expect you to stop. When you stop, there's going to be a big stir, and there was. I think probably in that church he was working in, there was a lot. I don't think this was the only reason, probably a loss of 10 or 15 people. Because many of us are more attached to a personality than we are the truth. Another question I've been pondering: to help or not help fund church building on the mission field? Because we've done that too. Through our church, money was raised to put a church in a place in India. $35,000 came through our church for that. And another big issue in the mission field, one of the things you often get asked about. So I've been pondering that. And I've come to the conclusion I'm not inclined to help do that again either. I don't regret what we did going backward, but going forward, I'm not inclined to do that. When I was just in India a couple months ago, in a question and answer period with national pastors and church planters and all, they asked Dr. Starr that I was traveling with his suggestions for how they could get a church building, some of these church planters and that. And Jim, he gave them a good answer, but it needed, just my opinion, it needed a little more. He quoted some scripture to them. I'm not downplaying the quoting of scripture. And I was just, listening, because it's hard for me to bite my lip, to be honest with you, and be quiet. And all of a sudden, it was like music to my ears when the moderator turned to me and said, "Pastor Luppino, do you have a comment?" Just like they said, "Happy birthday" to me. I said, "Yes, I do." I said, "Thank you for asking." I do. And I said to those national pastors, I said, "Gentlemen, you need to stop thinking about a church building as something that's dropped down out of heaven. That just poof, one day it appeared." Now, do you understand what I mean? Where do you think the money comes from a church building dropped down out of heaven? It comes from America. So my point was, you need to stop talking about a church building, and you need to see a church building as a sum of the parts. I said, for example, let's say you were going to build a building and you determined it would take 2,000 blocks. They're clay, they make them themselves most places. Let's say you needed 2,000. You should set a goal that we're going to raise the money for 200 blocks right here in our church this month. And then you've got 200. Next time you've got 400. Next time you've got 600. Eventually you've got 6,000. 2,000, sorry. As long as on the mission field they think of a building that just sort of appears, the only way they're going to get one is somebody else pay for it. But if they see it as how much metal they need, how many blocks they need, how much of this they need, and trusting God to provide it a little bit at a time as they go along, well, you're more inclined to see it as coming from God, and you take better care of it. And you get, in this case, an Indian building, not an American building. And I know I'm being a little repetitive. I understand that. Like, have you ever rented a car? How many of you ever washed a rental car? There you go. Who washes a rental car? It's not our car. Something that look, people on the mission field in some ways are not that much different than you and I. Something you trust God for, you sacrifice to pay for 2 bricks, you sacrifice more to help pay for a little bit of the metal that's needed, you help put it together, you know every dime that's spent, in India rupees and Tanzania shillings that's spent, you know you trusted God for it and you have a better sense. And you get an Indian building. In Tanzania, you get a Tanzanian building. Because we Americans, we think if you haven't got it all, you haven't got much of anything. In Tanzania, you don't need windows in a church building. There's no point, no need whatsoever. Because the windows will have bars in them. And the only thing to steal is the benches made of wood. But people would steal the wood, believe me. I mentioned to you, I was in a church building in India, and I was looking around, beautiful building, and I was looking around, and I said to somebody, who designed this building? And they told me. I said, I can tell. It was designed by an American. I said, this wasn't designed by an Indian. And they looked at me. And this is what their look meant. If we're going to pay for it, we're going to design it. You get the point? The thought process? I said, because a lot of this is totally impractical. Like you walk in the door, and there's what you and I would call a living room. Like my recliner is in our living room at home. In India, there's no such thing as a living room. Every room is used for something. Any of you grew up in one of those living rooms that you didn't use? I did. You use it at Christmas time. You tiptoe in, sit down, open your gifts, tiptoe back out, never use it again until next Christmas. This particular building I was in, this apartment in the living room, was totally useless because Indian people wouldn't even know how to use it. They wouldn't know what you would do with this square room that has no purpose. Couldn't be a bedroom because it was a through room into the house, right? It wasn't the kitchen. Obviously, it wasn't a bathroom. It was totally useless. I said to someone, what is this room? They said, a living room. And I said, you don't have a living room in a house in India? I said, when was the last time you went in a house in India that had a living room? In India, the living room is the kitchen, is the dining room, is probably somebody's bedroom. Much better to have those buildings be designed and paid for by people on the mission field, sacrificing a little bit of time by faith. Because, by the way, there's another issue. Then it comes down to who owns it. Who owns it? Like I haven't even asked myself when the last time the oil was changed in Seth's truck. For those of you who don't know, Seth is our older son. I haven't even considered the last time he changed the oil. I'm not going to lose any sleep about that. Samuel now, he's older, he's on his own. I don't say to him now, look, you've been changing the oil in your car and whatever. No problem. But the buildings we put money into, particularly big one in India, I thought so many times, I wonder what they're doing with this. I wonder if they're doing this the way it was. I wonder if they're doing this the way we said. I wonder if they're using the money the way. Shouldn't, in my opinion, and not everyone will agree with me, I understand, shouldn't be our problem. I'm not inclined to help people build church buildings on the mission field. In fact, if you're interested, I can give you the link to Dr. Day's website and the 3 church planters he supports and the 3 buildings that they have, bought and paid for by the people there. They're about the size of our foyer right there, maybe twice that size. Very simple. You know what a bathroom is most places in India? It's a hole in the ground. When an Indian walks into a bathroom that's a hole in the floor, they don't think anything of that. That's what they have at home. But when American designs it, you can't have that. Yeah, I don't want to get too far into this because some of you aren't aware of what I'm saying. But toilets aren't made in India like they're made here. They're different. I'll just say that much. But of course, if we design it, it's got to have a Western toilet. It's got to have a Western. Do you know in a bathroom in India, let's just say this is the bathroom, right? There's no such thing as a shower curtain. There's no such thing. The water comes out of the wall and might spray on the sink, might spray on the toilet, might spray on the door. An American would walk in and say, why in the world did you build this way? Why did you build this so when you turn the water on, it sprays right all over the sink? Do you know what the Indian answer is? That's how we did it. Do you know what we should be able to say to that? What do I care? I don't care how you build your toilet. I don't care how you build your bathroom. I don't care how you build it, but if I put the money into it, I, speaking generally, I'm going to say, well, look, you've got to have this, you've got to have one of those, you've got to have this, you've got to have that. And you walk into these places, and they almost look mini-American. Do you know what the problem with that is? They cost a lot of money to do it that way on the mission field. And I guarantee you, the average Indian pastor, if you said to him, why did you do that? They'd say, because the Americans told us to. Why do you do that like that? The Americans told us to. If I got a bunch of Indian guys around, went in that room or that living room and said to them, can I ask you guys a question? What is this room for? I guarantee you they'd all look at me and say, it's for some American thing. We don't know why this room is here. It's just the way the American designed it. So I'm not inclined to support buildings on the mission field going forward. The third thing we've done, and that I mentioned, is what about training national pastors? What about that? And as I said, I use the word training versus teaching because pastors need more than information. And let me say to you right up front, this is the area God has used us, training national pastors. This is the area where God has gifted me. Now, there's no spiritual gift, training national pastors. And it's a little hard to say this to you because it sounds like, this. But Charity went to India with me. I went and taught in class. I don't remember it specifically. I guarantee you, after class, Charity came up to me and said, Dad, you are really good at that. Teaching through someone else in another language. Illustrations that fit the culture that I'm in. Knowing what to say, what not to say. There's a lot of things in the mission field you wouldn't say. I'm not boasting. It's just God has gifted me to do this. Nancy went to India with me. And after the first class, she heard me teach. I don't remember. I guarantee she said to me that day, Chris, I know what you mean now when you said you're good at that. It's like you were just born to stand there in front of national pastors and talk to them, understanding their culture and their language. And by the way, it's exhausting and all these different things. It's where God has used us, teaching national pastors. In fact, I've said to other people, they're preaching or teaching after class, I've said to them, I said, look, I want to talk to you about something. Yep, what is it? I said, I want to suggest you don't say what you said tomorrow in class. I'm not telling them what to do, but I'm saying, let me explain to you how they understood what you meant. And I explain it back, and they say, well, why would they see it that way? I say, guarantee you they did. I guarantee that's what they're thinking. In fact, there have been times in India when the person in charge, a question was asked about the ministry, about one of the pastors, about anything, and the person in charge turned to me and said, Pastor Chris, would you answer that? Pastor Chris, would you talk to them about that right there? And look, it's just God. I appreciate Jane's testimony about the sermon this morning. Let me just say to you, it's all about God. It's not about me. But God has gifted me in that area of teaching, understanding national pastors, what they're trying to say in their own culture. So that I'm inclined to keep doing. In fact, I think going forward with mission travel, that's what we should be doing. Not building buildings, not supporting national pastors, but helping to teach and train national pastors. So on this trip to India, it was sort of about, well, figuring out what are the opportunities. I met all kinds of people, and if you'll go to India, you'll meet people because they think you'll bring them some money. And they're not all being malicious. They don't have very much. So there's a few possibilities. I was asked if I would return to the Bharat Bible College in Hyderabad, India, to do two things: to speak at their opening. They have a spiritual life conference at the opening of the school year, and to what they call being a guest lecturer. I thought, boy, if my Bible school teachers could see me now, I'm a guest lecturer. It was a general invitation with no time or date attached to it. I've also been asked to teach a class at the Himalayan Baptist Seminary by Skype. They have some of their teaching done by Skype. And here's why they can do it. It's in English. How many of you use Skype? A few of you. Well, we use it all the time because our kids are here and there and everywhere. And it's a remarkable thing to sit at a computer, talk, and see the person you're talking to. It's amazing. Well, Athem Chothi has some teaching done in his seminary. I call it his seminary. It's the seminary he's the president of, that's done by Skype. And it's in English. That helps. I actually think a model that could be used where I've been in India before, that Skype idea. I think it could be used effectively, but that's neither here nor there. Of course, the only problem is one thing. Right now it's 10 and a half hours ahead in Siliguri, India, where that is, than here right now. So the class starts at 2 in the afternoon. That's like 1 o'clock in the morning or some such thing like that. So Athem said to me, "Pastor, would you be able to teach a class by Skype?" I said, "Yes, I would." He said, "Now you have to get up in the middle of the night." He said, Athem speaks perfect English. He said, some of those who do that for us, you could tell, they got up in the middle of the night, took a shower, put their suit and tie on, and sat down at their desk in their suit and tie. He said, "Pastor, you don't have to do that. You can just come to the computer. Pastor, come to the computer just the way you are." I thought to myself, I've also been asked by Athem to travel back to where he is, to the Himalayan Baptist Seminary, to teach in person, to be able to interact with the students, which I really enjoy. These guys all speak English. And Athem is looking for some input, some counsel, some help, some direction. In fact, they asked me, could you plan to come back to Himalayan as soon as possible? Because we think you could help us in our school and teaching our students in that. So that's what I'm inclined to do. As of right now, tentatively, I'm going to plan to go back to Siliguri, India, the Lord willing. This hasn't been decided for sure yet. Probably leave the day after Easter because it's just before their mission conference and just before their graduation and just before their new missionary. They're starting a 2-month training program for students who feel the Lord's called them to be missionaries in the hills of India, Nepal, India, Bhutan, all those countries around there. And so I'm thinking towards that. We're going to need the Lord to direct us to redirect almost $600 of missionary support. And this is not a secret. Well discussed by the men's discipleship group. So much they were ready to stop discussing it. They unanimously agreed, if you're not going to go back there, we can't be supporting something we wouldn't be part of. We can't do that. So we need to redirect that money. And we gave a 1 year's notice about this. In other words, we told them 1 year before it's going to stop, we told them in 1 year this support is going to stop. We believe the church will have to vote because it's hard to raise missionary support. So we thought that 1 year was a gracious opportunity to continue to get the support. Most churches, you stop supporting something, it stops, bang, just like that, it's done. We didn't think that would be right, and so that's what we're doing. So with that said, I would like the church to pray. So this is what we do. We support the Raskinas, which our expectation is the end of March that will stop. We support, I think it's 5 national pastors. We expect that to stop. And we support the Mangalore Baptist Bible Institute, which again, all this is connected. We expect that to stop. What I'm going to suggest to the church to do is prayerfully consider just the portion that goes to the Mangalore Baptist Bible Institute, redirecting that to mission travel. In other words, instead of supporting a Bible Institute, instead of supporting these national pastors with one piece of that, because this gets a little complicated. If you don't understand how we do it, we support all of our missionaries just about the same. It would be redirecting. Today it would be $185 a month. That's what they all get, to mission travel. And to be very upfront with you about it, that would pay for one of these 2 trips a year. Because I take 2 trips a year. And people just give. They just give. Friends, people from the church, but a lot of people from outside the church, they just give to help carry on that ministry. And so we'll discuss that with the men's discipleship group. We'll discuss it as we go into our mission conference. And let me say to you, if the church says, Pastor, we're not going to do that. We're not going to redirect that money. It's about $2,000 a year. We're not going to redirect that money to mission travel. If the Lord supplies and the church is still behind it, I'm going to go anyway. My point is, it's still an investment. It's a continued investment in the training of national pastors. If you follow what I'm saying about that. It's still investing in Bible Institute work in the lives of pastors in India. Well, if I woke up in the morning and the Lord said, Chris, you're traveling to the mission field, days are over. Well, I would feel bad only because just like things you've done and you know the Lord has used you to do them. And it's hard for me to say this to you without sounding like I'm boasting. But when I was at the Barat Bible College, I preached the first service, preached the second service, and Dr. Baraga is talking a mile a minute. Pastor Chris, your sermons are right on target. Our students are understanding you. You're really addressing the issues. Can you come back? Yeah. When do you think you could come back here? Yeah. It's just where God has used us. So, the popcorn at home awaits you. The bowl of ice cream at home awaits you. Let's just take, it's 7 o'clock, 1 minute after, just take a few minutes to see if you have any comments or questions. Because usually if we have a question, someone else has the same question. Someone came up to me after the service last Sunday night and said, Pastor, I'm going to be really upfront with you. I don't think we should support national pastors anymore. And I hadn't even reached that. They said, I don't think we should do that anymore. Fine what we did. I don't think we should do that going forward. I'm listening to you. I'm praying about it. I don't think we should do that anymore. You might. It takes a lot of opinions. That's why they have chocolate and vanilla. Jeff. Coleman's bringing you a microphone so everyone can hear your question. Don't break out in song, because you'll be on one number and we'll be on another.
Let's all turn to page 449. We're assuming that we move forward and we do not support church building or national pastors anymore. I mean, are we going to support only missionaries that are church planting? Or could we also be supporting missionaries that are doing other things on the mission field to help, let's say, other churches, missionaries, that type of thing?
Yeah. Let me just be really clear about this. I've been asked about this a few times. I believe that that missions should be primarily church planting, but not exclusively. That's what I believe. I believe it should be primarily church planting, but not exclusively. There is no other kind of mission work in the New Testament but church planting. But in 2013, there are missionaries who have a ministry that is supportive of a church planter. It's part of a church planter's ministry, if you follow what I'm saying. And there's actually a lot of different mission work that's like that. My problem is work that's called missionary work that has no connection to a church, no connection to the church, no intention of starting a church. Not that God wouldn't use it. It doesn't seem to follow the pattern of the New Testament. So, Jeff, the answer is primarily, not exclusively. I actually think if I said, I can't tell the church exclusively. I don't have that kind of power around here. But I think I would be violating what Dr. Day said when he said, Pastor, be careful of hard and fast rules. Because someone may come along and we say, look, we need to support them. But we can't. We have a rule that says only church planters. Does that answer your question? So I would say primarily, not exclusively. That's what I think about that. That's it. You can taste the popcorn. I'm inclined to two things going forward. We have invited a missionary to our mission conference, a young fella, and his wife, and I think they have 2 little kids. He was born and raised in Mexico City. He's returning to Mexico City to be a missionary. Do you follow what I mean when I say perfect? Now, nothing is perfect, but he knows the culture, he knows the language, he's already got the connections. Connections are hard to build. Also, and I've felt this way now for quite a few months, and I've said it publicly, so I'm not saying anything. Leiko's home country is Japan. Very, very needy country, right? And so I've been thinking for I don't know how long, since all this was formulated, I said, well, look, if you're looking for a missionary to support church, we need to pray for God to lead us to a missionary in Japan. It's where Leiko's from. These are her people. This is a needy country, by the way, where it's really expensive to be a missionary. Really expensive. And so in our mission conference in this winter, by the way, if we support missionary in Japan, if we support missionary in Mexico City, and if we redirected towards a big increase in the mission travel so that we can continue to have a missionary ministry on the mission field, train national pastors, there'll still be a little bit of money left over to redirect. That doesn't involve increasing, adding, that's not an increase. That's staying just about what we're doing right now. So we actually need the Lord to, the Bible says our faith should be increased. When our faith is increased, the gospel will go to the regions and beyond. So that's sort of like staying the same. Then it's, Lord, who can we support to go forward? Or can we raise the ones we support? Whatever. So by the way, I don't know too many missionaries to Japan. I only know a few. One was introduced to me by Jeff and Leiko by email. I've never met her. Single young lady missionary. So Jeff, maybe that would fit your question. She's not a church planter. Very, very much involved in church planting with those who are doing church planting. Really, and I'm not just saying this to flatter Jeff and Leiko, a remarkable young woman, just from what I read of her ministry. Remarkable how God is using her and the things God is doing in her life. We did connect with another missionary from Japan. He and his wife sent us information. Pastor Boots and I both read it all the way through. Then we talked about it, and interestingly, we both weren't inclined to invite them here. A little hard to say because they're probably really nice people, but there were just a few things that it's a little uncomfortable feeling about a few things, and Pastor Boots had the exact same uncomfortable feeling about the exact same things before we talked about it. So, we steered towards this missionary in Japan and steered away, if you follow what I'm saying. We didn't, and I just told them, look, I'm just being honest with you. We read your material. The Lord didn't lead us to invite you to come visit our church, and they understood that. So I don't have all kinds of names to put in, but the Lord will direct, the Lord will direct us. But as I say, and I'm not just saying this here because Jeff and Leiko know this young woman, her name is Katie. Very, very dedicated, involved missionary who you would call a supporter of a church planter. She's a woman. She can't plant a church. Supporter of a church planter in a very big way, actually. Personal evangelism, the people she meets. She writes about the people she meets and talks to and witnesses to. It's wonderful. Don't even know her. Been really blessed. Been kind of, this is being recorded? Okay, I won't say what I was about to say. Be great catch for somebody, to me. I don't get involved in that. I stay clear of that. Okay, you can stop recording, Juan.